Welcome to the Building Web 3 podcast. I have my good friend Min. She is the EVP of Ecosystems at Algorand. Tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get into running ecosystems at Algorand?
Yeah, well, so I've been in tech all my life. Basically, after college, my first job out of college was actually software programming at an investment bank. But then I sort of moved on to a bunch of other roles, whether it's like strategy or product, et cetera. And I've worked at big companies to small companies and startups. And so I say that my first touch point with crypto was actually when I was working at this company in San Francisco. We had this was when Dogecoin first launched, and we were playing ping pong for Doge. And so I think I accumulated some tens of thousands of Doge from playing ping pong. But I professionally first got into crypto and blockchain through in 2018 through an acquisition. So I started my own company. It was acquired by blockchain.com, and I was running partnerships there ever since 2018. And that's when I first got exposed to Algorand. Back in 2019, when Algorand launched mainnet, blockchain.com was one of the first exchanges to list Algorand. So, ever since then, I've been super interested in what the ecosystem has been up to. And then 2 years later, or 3, 4 years later, here I am focused on ecosystems at Algorand.
And for people that are unfamiliar with Algorand, to give them a brief, or actually you can go as long as you like, talk to them a little bit about what is Algorand, what is the general mission of this chain?
Right. So Algorand is a layer one blockchain. It was started by Silvio Macaulay, who is a Turing Award winning professor at MIT. And as I mentioned, we launched on mainnet in 2019. We run a pure proof of stake consensus mechanism to secure the network, and it's really for scalability and security. And so how that works is, to participate in consensus, you have to hold algos, right? And you raise your hand, you commit yourself to participating in consensus. And of course, every algo is treated the same in the network in terms of your probability of getting selected. But if you hold more algos, right, then the chances of you being selected, of course, to participate increases. But how we select how we select who gets to propose and verify the next block is really the magic and the secret sauce. So the way that pure proof of stake works is, we run 3 rounds of randomized lottery using something called the VRF, verifiable random function, which was also invented by Silvio Macaulay. Basically, it outputs a number that can be cryptographically proven to be random, right? So we run 3 rounds, the first round to select who gets to propose the next block. And then we run another round to select a committee of 1,000 algo holders to vote on the next block. And then finally, we run the third round to select another 1,000 of algo holders to verify this block to be written to the network. And so this process really adds this layer of security to it. As you can tell, you wouldn't be able to attack this network because you wouldn't know which algo, which holder actually gets to submit and propose the next round. And so how that kind of, the features that this consensus mechanism then kind of sort of has, then one of the main differences of Algorand is that once that block is written to the network, it is final. And so we have instant finality on the network, which means there's no rollback, there's no forking, and we can do all of that within 2.8 seconds block time. So the speed, despite running 3 rounds of VRF, we're still so incredibly fast to be able to have instant finality. And so, so now 5 years in, the network has processed 2.4 billion transactions on chain and over 40 million blocks. We've never been down. There's been no downtime. And we have over 1 million monthly active users on the network. So it's been kind of exciting to see the ecosystem and the network thrive over the last little bit.
Yeah, it seems like a very vibrant ecosystem. Talk to us a little bit about what kind of projects are there? Is it largely like you'll look at certain chains that they might have like Arbitrum as an example. They have a very strong DeFi focus, or others might have a strong RWA focus. Is there a specific vertical you guys have focused on, or is it largely agnostic in that respect?
Yeah, I'd say we have a pretty big range of projects that are building on Algorand, and um, you know, they have each contributed, differently to the way that the ecosystem has grown. And I can give you kind of a snippet of the different types. One area of projects is really what we call the real world solutions. This is something that we talk about quite a bit because it really resonates if when we talk with everyday users. A good example is a project called TravelX. TravelX is an airline ticketing platform. They've partnered up with several airlines to issue tickets. But underneath the hood, these tickets are issued as NFTs. And so, airlines get to have kind of control over and transparency over the inventory, and the users get to actually be able to update and transfer, et cetera, as they need their tickets. And so, that's kind of a way in which, a traditional business, gets kind of really sort of turned upside down, with the using of the blockchain technology. Another good example of a real world solution is a company called Whole Chains. They are a global supply chain platform, and so they use Algorand to power the traceability platform, to verify and validate the origin, to provide an immutable record of the product's movement on chain. And so these are kind of examples of how real world solutions building on Algorand really has been kind of a cool area for us to talk to projects about. And also kind of staying on the real world side, we have real world tokenization, of course, as well. A pretty exciting one that we are a big fan of is this platform called Lofty. Basically, it is a tokenization platform for residential rental properties. And so, you can tokenize these rental properties as owners can, and then buyers can potentially buy a share of this rental property and earn income as part of that. So, this is like another way of like really innovating kind of the tokenization platform. We have, actually speaking of real world assets, there's also a company called A-Note, which tokenizes music catalogs. So another way for anybody to be able to participate in buying a share of a music catalog that is powered by Algorand. So those are kind of fun real world solutions and real world tokenization projects that I think it's like easy to understand, but then of course we also have quite degen, like DeFi projects, as you mentioned, also on Algorand. We have our typical lending platforms and, AMMs and DEXes, of course. But because of Algorand's instant finality, I'd say, this is actually an area that we can really be pushing the boundaries of building truly permissionless DeFi projects, like liquidations and on-chain transactions can really be settled on Algorand. So we have projects like Alltrade, which is they're a native cross-chain exchange, and they basically use Algorand to handle the backend. So they're just very, in addition to kind of your typical DeFi projects, there are also ways in which we've seen projects use Algorand as a backend because of, the sort of the finality and the speed elements that I talked about as well. So that's just kind of a snapshot of the different types of projects building.
Yeah, no, very exciting as well. And then because you're the EVP of ecosystems, talk to us a little bit about like what is like growing ecosystems or being ahead of ecosystem. What does that like role mean in, I guess, a day-to-day or like strategical sense?
Yeah, well, that means day to day, all I think about is how do we grow this ecosystem? And, actually part of what attracted me to this role at Algorand is growing an ecosystem means I have to work with builders and entrepreneurs and help them figure out how to launch projects. And that kind of brought me back to my startup roots. So it's been really fun and exciting. But the way I think about growing this ecosystem, there's how do we help individual projects? And then how do we help multiple projects across the board? On an individual level, it's really, there's, I guess, maybe two ways that we think about supporting projects. There's, of course, financially, right? We can support these projects through investments that we make for high potential projects that are in the midst of fundraising. If they're bringing in other investors, Algorand Foundation, we have a ventures team that would also co-invest as well. But there are a lot of non-financial ways to support these projects, right? So, working cross-functionally with the marketing team to give them visibility, bring them awareness, pull them into events as we sort of put together, our community. There's working with our tech team to make sure that we provide all the technical support that we can. And then there's, my team, the ecosystem team is really focused around supporting like individual projects based on what their needs are, whether it's providing them like introductions to different services or kind of packaging up ways in which we could help them. So that's at the individual project level. But we also think about how do we help multiple projects, right? And so, we've done this in a couple different ways. So we, for example, teamed up with a bunch of DeFi projects to launch DeFi rewards, targeted DeFi rewards, where we figured out like pairs, liquidity, ways to drive more liquidity into LP pools, right, for certain pairs within the DeFi ecosystem. We launched an NFT rewards program, which is kind of like working with marketplaces to figure out how do we attract new creators, how do we get new engagement within the ecosystem for these NFT users. So it's also being, it's a little bit of tracking the moment, with where the projects are to figure out how do we add the most value. But I'd say, that's kind of how do we help our existing projects. But one thing that is really quite important is, and I sort of see that as a big part of my role, is how do we attract new startups and new builders to come and build in our ecosystem, right? Like that pipeline of builders. And that's something that we've been focusing on this year quite a bit is, one, we want to bring in the developers to come into our ecosystem. But then how do we educate them and give them all the material that they need to start building? But then how do we convert them to become entrepreneurs, to actually launch a company and start a company? And then how do we help them be successful? Whether it's running, we have hackathons to help them launch ideas. We have a small incubator program that we've been running this year to help them form teams and to launch, help them educate these founders about how to like launch a product into the world, et cetera, et cetera. So we're kind of building this journey along with developers and entrepreneurs as well. And I think that's actually quite an important part of how I think about ecosystem growth.
Yeah, so you mentioned obviously helping the individual projects and then helping groups of the projects, things like hackathons, possibly grants. And then talk to us a little bit about like some of the developer tooling. Like, is it particularly easy to build on Algorand?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's when John Woods, our CTO, first joined Algorand, he made it his number one priority to improve the dev tools and I think he's absolutely spot on with this. Because in order to attract developers, you have to have the best in class dev tools. Those are like his words. And I fundamentally believe that that's the right call. And so last year we launched AlgoKit, which is our developer tool environment. So with one click install, you can then set up your developer environment super fast, super easy, and makes it super, super simple for anybody who wants to build on Algorand. And then earlier this year, we launched support for native Python, which again is all about how do we make it super easy for developers, and in this case, Python developers, to come and build on Algorand. And so with Algorand, you can launch your own private, Algorand network to start testing. You can launch templates and build smart contracts. You can deploy those templates, and you can check out the transactions on Laura, which is our block explorer, and so it's all about making it super easy for developers to come in, because that's the very, very first step in all this.
Yeah. And definitely developer tooling is one of the most important things. I remember when I was trying to get started on Solana, Actually, this was a little bit ago, but I actually couldn't get their testnet running, and I think they were
Yeah.
just down at the time. And I was like, well, yeah, I churned right off there immediately. And I was like, I'm
Did
not
you go
dumb. I
back?
worked at Google. No, I didn't go back. So that's
Right.
why I preach to developer documentation and things. It's like you only get really like 1 to 2 shots, really one shot, but two if you're being very generous on a
Right,
platform.
right. For the most part, you only get that one shot, and this is why we have to get it right. We have to get it right this one time that we have. And by the way, the documentation that you mentioned, also like our DevRel team right now is like hunkered down, making sure that we have the best documentation out there. Because again, like once you lose them, you lose them. So yeah, it's very, very important for sure.
Yeah, I was actually sorry to take a side notice. I was talking with this one project, and they were tweeting about like a head of growth, and I was like, "Oh, what do you guys need?" Like, I know a lot of people. I might be able to put you in touch. And they're like, well, to try to get more devs. And I go on their website, they have 0 dev docs, not even a GitHub README. So I'm like, what happens when what happens when you get a developer interested? Like, what do they do? And they just like stopped responding. I was just like, okay, like I would
How
focus
do
on
you
maybe
expect? Yeah.
yeah, like how do you like you get you finally convince a developer like, yeah, sure, I'll build. And it's like you don't even have a README. Like how
Oh,
what are they going to
yeah.
do when they get there? But yeah,
Yeah.
all
But
that
you know,
aside, but
I mean, maybe a little bit in their defense, it is hard because what that means is you have to stop doing everything else, right? And not everything else, but you have to like take a pretty big pause to really focus on it. It really, that's what makes startups hard actually, right? Is the prioritization and making and knowing that you're going to give up a bunch of other things, but if this is the most important thing, you have to do it and, you know, kind of willing to make that trade-off. And it is hard. It is hard to make that call
yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah, there's a classic quote there. There's no solutions. There's only trade offs. But if your
Yes.
goal is to get more developers and grow developers, it's like, but like, how do they even get started? It's like you have to have at least README. That would be my advice to them. So anyone building a startup here, at least have a README. Like it doesn't have to be a super put together quick start guide. But I was once
Yeah.
writing this guide for this company, Polymer, and they're like, oh yeah, actually to get that quick starter guide, you had to switch out the smart contracts. I'm like, how would anyone?
No, that.
No,
How
to
would
do that.
yeah.
Like, all right,
Yeah.
but all that is aside, I'm very happy you guys have invested so much in DevRel. You guys have very good docs, and would you say that's one of your guys' like unique selling propositions? Obviously, there's the instant finality, which I think is probably the biggest thing. But do you think that focus on making it really easy for devs to build is one of the main attraction points?
Absolutely. I mean, because you know, it's one of those sayings in startup like build it and they'll come. And we all know that never happens, right? So we know the tech is fantastic and we know that we are able to facilitate, high integrity enterprise applications. But if people don't know how to build high integrity what blockchain applications, then what's the point? And so it's all about giving them the tools and the resources to know how to build. And I'll give you an example of how this kind of played out, which is, you know, uh, we all know that blockchain has not been super reliable, right, as the settlement layer for payments because of the time to finality, instant, the rollbacks and the forking, et cetera. And so Algorand, because as I mentioned, we have instant finality and there's no forking, is the perfect solution for a payments company. But we partnered up actually recently with this company called Immersive. They are a fintech startup that issues debit cards as well with MasterCard. But we actually had to work with them to build the right smart contracts and to kind of build the right implementations to really showcase how we can leverage Algorand. So in this case, for example, as I mentioned, they issue debit cards. They have worked with other ecosystems, but they weren't able to do a fully non-custodial on-chain implementation. And so with us, we had to work with them to figure out how to build a smart contract that checks for on-chain balances in a way that none of the other ecosystems supported. And then to also then be able to make, the smart contract calls to support, whether they approve or reject a particular transaction. But we could preach all the beauties of instant finality, but it's like implementing and executing on what that actually looks like in a smart contract in the flow of funds that really does showcase. So now we're going to, I'm super excited for when this launches. It's in private beta. I'm in testing right now, but super excited for when we launch this card with Immersive. Basically, all of your balances are going to live on chain. So Immersive can check the blockchain to see if you have enough USDC in your wallet to make a transaction at Starbucks, right? Like that is something that we weren't able to do, or they weren't able to do with any of the other chains. So, and I think that's really a function of our engineering team and our DevRel team working really closely with them to, to show them how this could be done.
Yeah, absolutely. And then looking forward, as you see like the Algorand ecosystem start to evolve, where do you see Algorand in the next like year or two, and what kind of developments do you think will really like aid in Algorand success?
Well, the biggest thing and the most exciting thing that's coming to Algorand is consensus incentivization. We're calling it staking rewards. And so um, it may be a surprise to some of your listeners, but Algorand has not previously incentivized token holders to participate in consensus. Like it was all done on the goodwill of those participants. But I think as we think about the scalability and the growth and the security of the network, we are going to be launching consensus incentivizations where we will reward node runners, reward algo holders for participating in consensus. And so on the one hand, I'm super excited about this because this is fundamentally, this is a big shift for us as an ecosystem, but it is really going to, I think, bring us to a whole new set of users and a whole new set of Web3 participants, which I'm very excited about, the growth in general. But I'm also really excited because we're gonna, as a result of us launching staking rewards, we're gonna see, we already have a couple of DeFi projects committed to launching liquid staking tokens, and so we're going to see LSTs come into our ecosystem. And I think that is also going to drive a ton of innovation in the DeFi space in terms of all the fun, financial ish products, right, that they can launch on the on Algorand, which we haven't seen before because we've never had these LSTs in our ecosystem. So I'm really excited for consensus incentivization to really, what it could bring for us as a network. But I'm also really excited about what it's going to bring in terms of new projects and new products that are going to be launching in the ecosystem as well.
Yeah, you mentioned LSTs. Are there any areas we always like to ask because we have a lot of builders that listen to this for like startup ideas or areas you think would be good? Do you feel like there's an area of Algorand that you're like, no one's built this yet, or I think this would be a great app or a great use case, but people haven't really actioned it?
Yeah. It's funny you ask because I was just talking with our head of DeFi, Fred Estante, earlier this week, and we were just brainstorming. There's like this. So first of all, as I mentioned, as you know, we have instant finality, and what are some of the things that you can do with instant finality within DeFi? And one of the most obvious things is liquidation, right? Like if you think about it, being able to do instantaneous liquidation is so important to doing any derivatives products. And we actually don't. We had a few projects that were building derivatives or perp DEXes, but we don't have any. We don't have, I would say, anyone that's truly taking advantage of the instant finality element when it comes to building these products. So I definitely think there's a big opportunity in sort of the perp DEXes space for Algorand. And if any of your listeners are thinking deeply about how they can really disrupt the derivatives market, I'd say please come to Algorand. This is like we're the chain for you, for sure.
Absolutely. Well, builders hop on that opportunity. I think that's a great idea. And finally, like where can people learn more, one, about you, and learn more about Algorand? Where can they connect with you online, learn more about the company?
Yeah, well, I mean, Algorand.co is our website, which is the newly launched with our new brand. So please check it out. It's a great place to learn all things Algorand and also just like learn about the use cases that we have projects building on. And for me, I'm on Twitter, Min Tweet. And I'm also on Telegram. So please feel free to reach out.
Absolutely. Well, everyone go get involved with Min and go get involved with Algorand. I think there's some really exciting opportunities there, and especially an opportunity to take advantage of some of those, features like instant finality. So let's continue building the future of Web3.